Is by my reckoning, we are a couple of minutes behind, but I think that we are. It's good to have Judy's family all gathered here with us today. That's a wonderful thing. Uh, okay, we technical things going on here. So we're going to be, as memory serves, we wrapped up chapter 8, which was basically a summary of Solomon's achievements. And we note that Solomon built a fleet of ships to ply the Red Sea and to go down to North Africa and all around to Saudi Arabia, and therefore and collected, if you will, plundered. Probably is more like it. Plundered the coast of Africa, and so as he did so, people came to him to say, "Well, look, rather than you plunder, let us bring it to you. Then we've got a little control over the process." Okay, so they pledged themselves to him, and they gave him duties, if you will. They basically paid tribute or ransom, as it's called, and did so on a regular basis, and a vast amount of it, I might add. But we note that that the word of him spread. It's called word of his wisdom, but it is also fame of Solomon, and perhaps it was fame, and perhaps it was infamy. We're really not 100% sure of that, but we do note that, however it is, that it appears that her lands were being plundered as well. And so now we see that the Queen of Sheba is about to visit. Okay, so having set that stage, before we conduct our study, let's make sure that we go to God and ask Him for guidance in that. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this beautiful day and the safety that you've afforded us. And we know that there are many who are traveling, and we ask that you keep them safe as well. The safety that you have afforded us as we have come together for this Bible study, and so grateful we are for this word, for your gospel, and the opportunity to read of your relationship with man, and learn the lessons from it and apply those lessons to our lives, to use the Old Testament and the New Testament together and harmonize them, and it just points to your glory, and it points to the fact that you are in control of all things, and you have told us that, and you have proved that to us over and over again, Father. And we're so thankful that we can rely on you to do those things that you say, and we thank you for your guidance, and we thank you for your gospel, and we thank you for your Son and the sacrifice that he paid for us. We ask that this study be scripturally sound, that it be pleasing in your sight, and that it help us to understand your word, and to be able to take your word out to the world that so desperately needs it, and to defend your word against those who would detract from it. We ask that you be with those who are unable to be here, but we note that there are many who are online, and we're grateful for the opportunity to be able to present this to them through that medium. And we ask that you be with them, and heal them, and keep them safe wherever they are traveling. Our prayers go out on behalf of Fran as she continues to deal with her chemotherapy, as well as Judy's daughter, and we're so thankful that her chemo has worked as well as it has, and we look forward to continued improvement in that, and we thank you for the measure of health that we all have, and we thank you for the healing wonders of this body. We thank you for the skills you place in the hands of the doctors and the nurses and the healthcare professionals. We ask that you be with Tammy Fletcher, that you be with our travelers, and we have several who are traveling. We ask that you be with Phil and Mary, and we ask that you be with Mike and Karen and keep them safe. And of course, Kathy and I will be traveling this week, and we ask for your protection and your safety there as well, and that we all be brought back to that measure, to our be brought back together again in accordance with your will. We ask that you be with our military personnel wherever they are. We ask that you be with our first responders and our healthcare providers as they seek to keep us safe and to help us recover from those accidents which do happen. We thank you so much for the we ask that you be with our leaders, Father, and we ask for calm, and we ask for reason in this upcoming political season. And we know that things can get out of hand, and we ask, Father, for cooler, calmer heads to prevail as we seek to make those hard choices that will impact the future of our nation. And as we make these choices, Father, we also once again acknowledge that you are in control of all these things, and that our nations all will ultimately bend to your will, whether we want to or not. And we as Christians look to your guidance, and we look to your protection in these troubling times. We offer all these prayers in the name of your precious Son. Amen. Okay, so we're back to the point now where, as I did the run up here, we note that the Queen of Sheba is now coming to the king, and we note that other kings have done that already and will continue to do that. So the Queen of Sheba is there as much as anything else on behalf of her country, for the protection of her country. So she's arrived with a delegation before King Solomon. And who do I've got Kathy. Kathy's going to read for us today. And Kathy, you're reading out of the New King James?
King James.
King James? Okay, great. I note that it's interesting to note, as I have done a lot of my studying, that the King James Bible was what was used. Of course, there was also this, whenever I went to preaching school at Memphis, they used the King James Version. And of course, they said, but you could use the ASV if you don't mind being, and those that use the ASV were gently ribbed and chided about it. But the ASV is a wonderful version to use. And I note that Bear Valley Bible College prescribes the American Standard Version as the Bible that they used. And so we see that they're all 99% the same, 99 and over 99% the same. There are some differences in a few key words that change it. I note that I've noted some differences, and when those differences appear, when they're worth mentioning, I want you to understand that I will say something about it. But I don't have any problem with anybody using the King James Version, the American Standard Version, the New American Standard Bible, or the New King James Version. Those are all excellent Bible versions. Okay, the difference in some of them may be in the difference in the manuscript that they used. We note that the King James Version is actually a modernization of a manuscript that the Latin Vulgate, if you will. Okay, and so we see that there's some differences between the King James Version and American Standard and New American Standard, which used a different manuscript, and so there are some slightly different verses of it. If you go, for instance, to the Syriac Bible, you'll note that the Syriac Bible has is probably, it's actually what the Greek Orthodox Church uses a manuscript that's come from the Syriac Bible. We note also that they don't use instrumental music, and they don't do infant baptism. They do adult baptism only. Okay, so that's interesting to note the difference between the Greek Orthodox. Having said that, we also note that the Greek Orthodox Church, just as the Church of Rome, has popes and bishops and archbishops and all of that, so they have an infrastructure which is not scripturally prescribed. Okay, and so error exists where we try to depart from God's word, and that's the challenge that has been before us for centuries, for millennia. Okay, all right. So let's go back to, having said that, and let me jump down off my soapbox here and go back to the Queen of Sheba, chapter 9, verse 1.
And when the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to prove Solomon with hard questions at Jerusalem, with a very great company, and camels that bear spices, and gold in abundance, and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she communed with him of all that was in her heart. And Solomon told her all her questions and there was nothing hid from Solomon which he told her not.
Yeah, so when we look at that, they obviously she sat down and they had, I look at this as much as anything else as a summit meeting, okay, where they dealt with all those details, basically in a closed room or through interpreters or however they did that. But they sat down together in a formal discussion and brought up all of the points and issues that she had and all the points and issues that he had. And of course, we know that there's going to be what I consider to be a good deal of flattery, because when we speak about the wisdom of Solomon, we have to wonder whether the worldly wisdom of Solomon did not completely override the spiritual guidance that God wanted him to draw from the Old Testament, from the books that were there. Because you're going to see as we continue on that there are a lot of issues here, and I think if I can get us to the end of 9, if I'll shut up and let Kathy read and get us to the end of chapter 9, we'll bring up those points. Okay, so we see a summit and we see gifts which are given. Okay, she said if he's going to take them anyway, I might as well bring them to him. Okay, and so that is what she's done. So she's kind of taken control of the issue, and that's good for her people. That was very smart on her part. Now, continue on, please.
And when the queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, his cupbearers also, and their apparel, and his ascent by which he went up into the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her.
There was no more spirit in her. Now, what does that mean? She went up there thinking, well, maybe I can talk to him and we can negotiate. And then when she got there and she saw that he had ships, he had soldiers, he had amassed a great deal of wealth. He had this great pomp and circumstance. And remember that many of Solomon's governors were actually military generals. Okay. And that's not a surprise either when you consider the things that have been going on, okay? Because Solomon is not instilling a great deal of confidence in his subjects, the ones whom he governs, and we'll see why that is, okay? He's sowing the seeds of the revolution that will split the kingdom between 10 tribes becoming the northern Israel and 2 tribes remaining in Judea and surrounding areas. All right. So what we see here is that she has decided, well, I'm going to have to join him. Better to join him than if you can't beat him, join him. Right. So that's what she's done. She's basically capitulated, just like all the other kings have done, because he's so powerful at this point. And we'll get an indication of how powerful that is directly. Okay, so go ahead, Judy. Go ahead, Kathy.
And she said to the king, it was a true report which I heard in mine own land of thine acts and of thy wisdom. Howbeit I believed not their words until I came. And mine eyes had seen it, and behold, the one half of the greatness of thy wisdom was not told me, for thou exceedest the fame that I heard. Happy are thy men, and happy are these thy servants, which stand continually before thee and hear thy wisdom. Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighted in thee to set thee on his throne, to be king for the Lord thy God, because thy God loved Israel, to establish them forever. Therefore made he thee king over them, to do judgment and justice.
To do them judgment and justice. Now, I'm not sure how he put that, whether that was a lecture that she was giving him, whether she was reminding them or not. I don't know what her religious background had been at that time, but obviously she had advisors who had helped her to basically compose a speech on behalf of her country and praising him as a God-chosen king, which in fact he was, okay? And offering that a great deal of flattery, and we note that his his wisdom, or worldly wisdom, of course. We see the proverbs that he generated and his sayings, but we also see that the word wisdom is tossed around here as a form of flattery in many cases. And I don't believe, I understand that people will say that Ezra wrote a lot of fairy tales and everything, but I think that you'll find that Ezra, if Ezra is the chronicler that we talk about here, that what he was doing was creating, he was showing Solomon's, I've said this before, showing Solomon's warts. He was showing Solomon's flaws and how those flaws would ultimately affect Israel, because Solomon started out with a kingdom, okay? And by the time his son was done, there was a revolution. It was a mess. In fact, Solomon was dealing with that even sooner than that, okay? Solomon spent most of his rule dealing with rebels, okay, in his kingdom, and his policies had an awful lot to do with that. All right, so keep going, please.
And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, and of spices great abundance, and precious stones. Neither was there any such spice as the queen of Sheba gave King Solomon.
So she gave him some spices and some herbs that were expensive, very, very rare. Okay, and so this was a great gift. But in addition, it was a peace offering, saying, don't come and maraud in my country. I'll bring you what you need, or your ships can pull up and we'll load it onto them at the port and you can bring them back. Okay, so she wanted to take control of the situation within the borders of her own country, which I believe is that area which is Oman and Yemen today. So all right, so keep going.
And the servants also of Huram and the servants of Solomon, which brought gold from Ophir, brought algum trees and precious stones. And the king made of the algum trees terraces to the house of the Lord, and to the king's palace, and harps and psalteries for singers, and there were none such seen before in the land of Judah.
Okay, so we see that he has used all this. He's used the gold and he's used these algum trees. Now, what is an algum tree? An algum tree is a very hard, sort of a reddish wood. Think of ebony, which is black, and then look at it as red, and it's very rich and very deep and very luxurious, and it polishes very, very well. It polishes like almost a glass surface. You can't even see that. So that's a waste of time. Those online might be able to see that now, but it is a deep, deep red, and it polishes to a glass-like, a mirror-like image, a sheen on the wood. And so he used that to build furniture out of, and to build railings. And can you imagine how magnificent that must have been? Okay, and we'll see another indication of that later on as we continue. So continuing on, please, verse 12.
And King Solomon gave to the queen Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked, beside that which she had brought unto the king. So she turned and went away to her own land, she and her servants.
So he accepted her gift, he accepted her peace offering. She went home, they made the arrangements and everything so that she could keep basically his army out of their borders, because that was the only alternative, was you pay tribute or we come and take it. You give it to us or we're going to take it. All right. Okay. And that sounds kind of harsh when you talk about a king who was under God's control, but I'm going to point something out to you if we get to the end of this. Go ahead.
Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold, beside that which chapmen and merchants brought. And all the kings of Arabia and governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon.
So all the kings of Arabia and governors of his country brought gold, brought tribute. And so we see that he is now controlling an area which goes up into Assyria, into the Fertile Crescent, and goes down to Egypt, and all the way across, actually down into Egypt, and all the way around the Red Sea on both sides. In North Africa, he's drawing tribute from North Africa. He's drawing tribute from from Arabia, and so he's got a he's drawing a vast number of, they call it taxes if it's local. If it's there, they call it tribute from all around the known world at that time. Now, how much is that? The Clark commentary that I have, it was written and printed in, I think it was originally in 1880, and of course, he, being British, did all his calculations in sterling, pound sterling, noting, of course, that I think the going rate for pound sterling now is like $1.80. I've seen it as high as $2.20 to the pound sterling. So I'm not going to burden you with all of the calculations that they use, but in 1880, the gold that was brought to him every year was estimated to be about $1 billion a year. The silver, half of that. So his income from tribute was $1.5 billion and upwards a year from these countries that brought all this to him. And so what did he do with all this wealth? Did he use it to help his people? Did he use it to ease their burdens? This is what he did. Go ahead, Kathy.
And King Solomon made 200 targets of beaten gold. 600 shekels of beaten gold went to one target, and 300 shields made he of beaten gold. 300 shekels of gold went to one shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon.
That's the king's palace. The house of the forest of Lebanon is the king's palace. So he put them in his palace. Okay? All right. Go ahead.
Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. And there were 6 steps to the throne, with a footstool of gold, which were fastened to the throne, and stays on each side of the sitting place, and 2 lions standing by the stays. And 12 lions stood there on one side, and on the other upon the 6 steps. There was not like made in any kingdom.
There was not the like made in any kingdom. So what did he do with all that gold? a show of wealth. All right. Continue on.
And all the drinking vessels of King Solomon were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was not anything accounted of in the days of Solomon.
Okay, so when we says that the accountants, those who did the inventory of all the goods, did not count anything but gold vessels, gold plates, gold goblets, gold silverware, goldware. I don't know why you call it silverware when it's made out of gold, but gold silverware. And so, you know, we say, well, we come to our house and we say, don't use plastic. We don't use plastic except when the kids are here. We use glass. Okay. Some places go, well, we use the glass for our kids. When we got guests, we use the fine china, bring out the fine crystals. He says, we don't use silver around here. We use gold and gold only. Okay. In another place, it said that silver was considered, and we'll get to that too, silver was considered to be of so much less value than gold that they esteemed it like the stones under their feet. That was Solomon's attitude, believe me. Those people, the subjects, his subjects, would have loved to have a small fraction of that wealth at their disposal. Okay, all right. So we see a ruling class, and we see a poor working class in this nation, and the middle class, middle upper class, is almost entirely military and infrastructure. All right. Okay. Keep going.
For the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Huram. Every 3 years once came the ships of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory and apes and peacocks. And King Solomon passed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon, to hear his wisdom that God had put in his heart.
Okay, now I've kind of let you get ahead of me here just a little bit, but I want to go back to this. I want to go back to the overlay of the pure gold and the drinking vessels, and I want to if I could take you to the parable that Jesus gave us in Luke chapter 12. Give me just a second. I'm going to go to it. I hope. Yes, go ahead.
My version says ivory, apes, and monkeys.
Yes, the King James Version says silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. What, you're using New King James Version? Yeah, okay. So, but the bottom line is these were exotic animals that were brought together. I don't know whether he had a zoo or something there that he used, a menagerie of some kind or another, and he used all these. But those, of course, we look at Tarshish, and of course, I think you read Tarshish. We note that in some places Tarshish is used for Tarsus, which is actually on the Mediterranean Sea itself. But Tarshish there actually should read Africa. So when he went to North Africa, he went to Africa, and all these things were brought back, okay? In all probability, the inhabitants there trapped these things, brought them to the port, and his merchants bought them as curios and brought them back on the ships, okay? But let me go back to Luke 12 for you, and I want to note something. We've talked about his ostentatious wealth. Hope I can get to it. There we go. Luke 12, and I want to start at verse 16 for you. He spake a parable unto them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, because I have no room where to bestow my fruits? And he said, this will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and goods, and will say to my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? Ain't no luggage racks on hearses. All right? Okay, so let's go back. Go back by going forward. And we've talked about the servants of Hiram, and so we see that. And of course, we just talked about Luke 12, and we see that so is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Is Solomon being rich toward God, or is Solomon being rich toward himself at this point? We have to ask this question. Now, once again, I want to point out that Ezra is not blind to this. Ezra is making a point, okay? All right, that as the king goes, so goes the nation. So keep going.
And they brought every man his present, vessels of silver and vessels of gold, and raiment, harness and spices, horses and mules, a rate year by year.
A rate year by year. What does that mean? If it's a rate that is set year by year, is that a gift? Is that a tax? Is that a tribute? Okay. These were imposed upon them at pain of military action. All right? Okay. They couldn't just say, we don't feel like doing it. Okay? Because I know that that Jeroboam, remember that Jeroboam was approached by a prophet, the seer, Edo, or I should say Ahijah, okay? Was approached by him and said, you're going to be part of this revolution, okay? And the kingdom is going to be split, and you're going to get 10 tribes, and Rehoboam's going to get 2. Well, the word of that prophecy got back to Solomon, and Solomon sent men after Jeroboam and sought his death, and Jeroboam had to flee to Egypt. did not return from Egypt until he found that Solomon was dead and Rehoboam was back. That's all in 1 Kings, I think. All right. Okay. So continue on. Continue on, please.
And Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the chariot cities, and with the king at Jerusalem.
And with the king at Jerusalem. Now, 1 Kings 4 says Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. And those officers produced victuals for the king, and they taxed their regions is what they did. And all came unto his table, every man in his month, and they lacked nothing. Solomon paid their salaries and their wages to maintain an army. Barley and straw for the horses and dromedaries, brought them to where the officers were, every man according to his charge. And of course, the archaeologists have seen that there are many places. Megiddo is one of them. There are other places as well where they have stables, have dug up basically stables and training grounds for these chariots and these horsemen. Some of these chariots were so big they had to have 4 horses to pull them, okay? Keep that in the back of your mind, if you will, as we continue on. Remember how oppressive it must have been. The very people who were charged with collecting these taxes were the people who were being supported by them and the people who were subduing the populace. In other words, it was a very authoritarian government. Protesters were dealt with harshly. There was no such thing as freedom of speech in Israel. All right, keep going.
First of all, why does one say 40,000 and one says 4?
That's a big difference. That's the question I want to note. Okay, Solomon, this one says 4,000 stalls, and that is probably a translational error because 40,000 stalls of horses for the chariots and 12,000 horsemen. If you got 12,000 horsemen, you're going to need that many horses, especially because some are riding horses and some are riding chariots, which have to be pulled by at least 2 horses, and in many cases, if it's a heavy battle chariot, 4 horses. Okay, the Romans had most of their battle chariots were 4-horse chariots. Okay, they didn't mess around. All right, because why? Well, because the more powerful it is, the farther they can go before it gets bogged down in all the people that it's wading into. Go ahead. Yeah.
It says 40,000 is probably just copied for 4,000.
To 4,000.
Which is read for in some Greek manuscripts here.
Yes, and we have seen that. And even if you consider 4,000 stalls and horses, 12,000 horsemen, the math isn't right. So we hear 12,000 horsemen twice. Now, having said that, I have to say that 40,000 horses is pretty hard to imagine. So is it possible that 12,000 horsemen and 4,000 horses, well, that's 1 man for every 3 horses. So I'm not sure how the math is. So I don't want to get bogged down in it, but I do, and we want to note that there are some translational differences in this. But the point is, he had lots of horses, lots of chariots, and lots of soldiers. He had a mechanized division. He did that so that, and he showed that to all those foreign leaders and dignitaries who came to his country. That's the big stick policy, right? Okay? He showed the stick to them. And then he offered him a carrot. All right? That's the carrot and the stick. And Solomon had a big stick. All right? Okay. So keep going.
And he reigned over all the kings from the river even unto the land of the Philistines, and to the border of Egypt. And the king made silver in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar trees made he as the sycamore trees that are in the low plains in abundance.
Okay, so now what is that? So we see the standard that he set for himself and for his soldiers and for the upper class, if you will, of the country. He reigned over all the kings. That's from the Mesopotamia, by the way, the Euphrates River, the Euphrates River, from the Euphrates River through the Fertile Crescent and down to Egypt, okay? And silver was as plentiful as stones. That's the statement that's being made here. Okay, he made silver like stones. He was so wealthy that what would be a fortune to us would have been chump change to him. Okay, and cedar trees, hardwoods, and lush trees and expensive trees, and he's talking about the algum trees and trees like that, made like scrub oaks. Okay, they were they had so many of them. They're so plentiful that they were like so commonplace that those in particularly the upper class just took it for granted, literally. And that's what it's about. It's about taking the wealth for granted. All right, so, and did you read verse 28?
Mm-mm. And
Okay.
they brought unto Solomon horses out of Egypt and out of all lands.
Okay, now remember, we'll go back to this here again. Remember God's prohibition against horses, against dealing with Egypt, and other things as well. Continue on, please.
Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, first and last, are they not written in the book of Nathan the prophet and in the prophecy of
Ahijah, the Shilonite.
Shilonite, and in the visions of Iddo the seer against Jeroboam the son of Nebat?
Against Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Okay, so now, and of course he's referring, and this is why when people say that Ezra was writing fairy tales, he was making this up as he went along in a lot of cases, they don't understand that all of this aggrandizement, okay? I mean, who would write a story of conspicuous wealth like this and not be somewhat critical of it? So he was writing this to emphasize the corruption which had occurred in this kingdom, okay? And so we see that 1 Kings 11:29 gives us the prophecy of Ahijah for and against Jeroboam, okay? And note that that Jeroboam basically became a convict as soon as this word got back to Solomon. Solomon chased him until he ran into Egypt. He went and hid in Egypt. And he hid in Egypt until Solomon was dead. All right? Okay, so now having said that, go ahead.
And Solomon slept with his fathers, and he was buried in the city of David, his father. And Rehoboam,
Rehoboam, his son
reigned in his stead.
The son of one of his concubines. Okay, Solomon had lots of sons from concubines. Rehoboam was one of them, probably the first. All right. Okay, and so we see that's how it worked there, and then I want to point out something here. And I think I might have, let me see if I got those. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
And Rehoboam went to...
Oh, no, I'm sorry. We're done with Rehoboam. No, I'm sorry. What I meant to do was stop right here. And I'm going to go ahead and mark that. Did not want to get ahead of myself. Okay, so Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, his father, and Rehoboam, his son, reigned in his stead. Now, having said that, having read all this that we have read here about the wealth that was amassed and everything, I want to go back and point out that what looms large over all of this passage, which Ezra did not write, nor did he need to, because it was already there in Deuteronomy, was this: God speaking through Moses, saying that you will have a king of your choice, but you're not going to like what you get in most cases. And the king that I choose, God chooses, okay, shall not multiply horses to himself. That's one. Nor cause a people to return to Egypt. That's two. To the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord has said unto you, you shall henceforth return no more that way. Don't do that again, okay? Don't go back to Egypt. Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart not turn away. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. And Ezra is telling us that Solomon did every single one of these things. And that is why God split the kingdom. Okay? And we will see that split taking place as we continue on in Second Chronicles. Are there any comments or anything to read? Thank y'all for bearing with me and putting up with my going down rabbit holes and everything. But it's great to spend this time with y'all, and we come together to study so that we can, because we know that we can rely on each other, asking the questions like you asked, okay? And note that it keeps us all on the same page, so to speak. Israel disappeared. No, is Israel that rich now? No. Okay, all that money was plundered. All that wealth was plundered and split up. Remember that the nation of Israel now did not exist until the 50s. Okay, it's not even 100 years old yet. Israel isn't. The nation as it exists today. Okay, Israel was destroyed by the Romans. They were scattered everywhere. Okay? So the Jews were scattered. They call that the diaspora. All right. And until and of course you had the holy wars to try to win all that back and preserve it, because we fought between Christians, we fought between Muslims. All right? And the Jews were kind of stuck out on the outside looking in. Then of course we had the wars, the German eradication process, extermination process, and then they had Jews in Russia who wanted to migrate. And so there was a great international petition for founding a nation, a place for all the Jews to go to be repatriated, because they kept, that's what the Leon Uris book was all about, and because of that, we basically took the land away from Palestine and gave it back to Israel. It was more or less under the protectorate of Great Britain at that time, that whole region. After the Second World War, they maintained a presence there. Between the French and the British, that land was pretty much controlled. There were chieftains, but they had to deal with the military power that was left there. And so that land went back to, that nation of Israel was formed at that time. Okay. And that conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelites, or the Palestinians and Israel, that we see today goes all the way back to when Israel failed to move all the inhabitants of Canaan out of the land and instead made pacts with them and used them for their pressed labor. And God said that they would be a thorn in Israel's side, and to this day they are. Okay? But note that Israel that exists today is a man-made institution. It is not a God-made institution. God took them out of that nation as he promised he would. He said, it's yours now, but if you fail me, I'll take it away. And he did. All right. Okay. Any other comments? Thank you, everybody. Back at the top of the hour for our service. And don't forget, we've got a fellowship meal. That should be an oh, by the way. That should not be an enticement to come in for service. So